Welcome to the Spiritist Companion Podcast. My name is Yuri Castro, and I'll be your companion on this journey where we study, reflect, and put Spiritist teachings into practice. This is our special segment, Parable Fridays, where every 2 Fridays we study a parable of Jesus through the lens of Spiritism. And today we reflect on one of the most well-known parables, perhaps, one that deeply stirs our consciences and remains as current as it was 2,000 years ago, the parable of the Good Samaritan, found in Luke chapter 10. And in this passage, we find out that an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And then Jesus replies, "What is written in the law? How do you read it?" Then the man answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "You have answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this and you will live." But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked, "And who is my neighbor?" And at that point, Jesus told him the parable of the Good Samaritan. A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. "Look after him," he said, "and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have." And at that point, Jesus turned to the expert and said, "Which one of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers?" And the expert in the law replied, "The one who had mercy on him." Jesus then tells him, "Go and do likewise." But before we dive into this parable and study it through the lens of Spiritism, let's recall the geopolitical and perhaps even religious background of that time. There was a strong hostility between Jews and Samaritans. Samaritans were seen by the Jewish people as heretics, impure, because they worshipped differently and had a history of division from the Jewish people. So for many Jews, even contact with a Samaritan was degrading. And it's interesting that it is precisely with this climate, let's call, of prejudice and intolerance, that Jesus chooses the Samaritan as the central character of his story. And of course, my friends, this is no accident. He's teaching us that charity knows no boundaries, that neighbor is not defined by race, religion, social class, but by the need before us. Jesus therefore invites us to break down walls and build bridges. The priest and the Levite, both religious men connected with the temple, saw the wounded man but passed by on the other side. And we'll never know exactly why. Perhaps they feared becoming impure. Perhaps they were also busy. Perhaps they felt someone else would help. But the reality is that true worship was not in their temple. It was right there on the road. And if we reflect a little bit, we'll see that a lot of the times this happens to us as well, where we are the ones that are passing by and we're not helping someone in need, thinking that worship is meant for temples, for churches, for spiritist centers, for whatever place we go to worship, when there's a lot of work to be done around us. In the work of Allan Kardec called The Gospel According to Spiritism, He summarizes this lesson perhaps in a single phrase: without charity, there is no salvation. There's a lot of exploration of that theme because it is not religion that saves, but charity lived in real practical actions of love. Charity, that was also another episode here. In the same book, The Gospel According to Spiritism, we also learn that charity is the fundamental virtue upon which all earthly virtues are based. In all worlds, charity is the eternal anchor of salvation, the purest emanation which comes direct from the Creator, part of His own virtue which He gives to all creatures. We all have that. We all have the ability to be charitable. We all have the duty, actually, to be charitable. The same book by Allan Kardec is also going to say that all of mankind's obligations are resumed in the maxim, without charity there's no salvation. This maxim, without charity there's no salvation, consecrates, my dear friends, the principle of equality before God and freedom of conscience. And that's a beautiful reflection for us to have that Kardec grants us, because without charity there's no salvation. And if we look at ourselves and we realize that we're all brothers and sisters, we're all creation of the same Creator, we will become more charitable. We can free our conscience and help the neighbor, help those in need. And as always, Jesus' parables always carried a deep spiritual lesson. The neighbor in this one is universal. In Spiritism, we learn that we're all immortal spirits, like I said, children of the same Creator. Social condition, culture, religion, or earthly status do not matter. We are brothers and sisters, all in the same journey of evolution. We can also get a little creative here and see how this parable can reflect our inner journey as well, because we can see ourselves in each character. The wounded man, which is our own moral and spiritual falls, these things that we succumb to. The priest and the Levite, when we know the theory, but we fail to put that theory into practice. And that's one of the purposes of this podcast, is to learn, to reflect, and to put the theory into practice. And also, we can see ourselves as the Samaritan, the awakened soul who puts love into action for those moments when we're actually able to shed selfishness, pride, and help somebody in need, even if we're busy. Because if we remember from the parable, the Samaritan wasn't just walking around, he wasn't just taking a stroll, he was busy, he was traveling, but he still stopped and gave that person that was wounded all his attention, all his care, all his love. That's what charity is. Charity is love in movement. In the Spirit's book, Kardec asks, what is the true meaning of charity as understood by Jesus? Benevolence for all, indulgence toward the imperfections of others, and forgiveness of offenses. That's the answer that the Spirit gave him. And that is a valuable answer because we see that in the Samaritan. We see that in that person that helped the other one that was in need. We can even say that this parable also challenges us at a societal level, just like it did back then. But nowadays our world is filled with wounded ones along the road. Refugees of war, homeless people, those trapped in addiction, marginalized groups, and all of the other ones that are wounded in their own ways. Who will be the Samaritan for them? In Spiritism, we talk about the immortality of the soul. We talk about this world becoming a world of regeneration instead of trials and atonements. But we are the ones responsible for that evolution. We are the ones responsible for making ourselves better so we can continue to inhabit the world as the world is also progressing. And we do that by exercising charity. If we want a regenerated world, we have to begin with compassion because that embraces all. And we can also find spiritual teachings in other books by Kardec that reflect this parable. So for instance, in Heaven and Hell, We will learn that spiritual joy or suffering is tied to the love and charity practiced during life. We learn that good spirits draw near to those who do good, while indifferent hearts can attract inferior spirits. In posthumous works, Kardec emphasized that true faith is unshakable because it is rooted in reason, and reason shows us that love is the driving force of the universe. And we can also apply it to our daily lives. So here are some examples of charity and how to be like the Samaritan. Number 1, material charity. So helping financially or sharing resources like the Samaritan who paid for lodging. The Samaritan also helped that wounded man through material means by providing transportation, by providing money for whatever expense the innkeeper would have. Number 2, we can also think of moral charity. So offering patience, forgiveness, and understanding, which is often harder than material help, because a lot of the times we give material help because that is in excess, but moral charity, so patience, forgiveness, that is sometimes way harder. We also have charity of time, so pausing our busy lives perhaps to understand, to listen to someone in pain, lending a shoulder, lending a friendly ear to those who need us by giving them something we cannot recuperate, which is our time. We also have charity of example, so acting with kindness and integrity in small, everyday ways, always remembering that we have a multitude of spirits surrounding us. So do we want to attract the good spirits or the ones that are still dwelling in pain and in anger and in hatred? By changing our actions and being good examples, we're going to be affecting those around us, discarnate or incarnate spirits. And here's a practical question for all of us. How often are we passing by on the other side of the suffering around us? My dear friends, the parable of the Good Samaritan teaches us that it is not enough to know the law or to know the teachings. We must live it. We must live the law, live the teachings. It is not enough to pray with words. We must pray with hands, with our hearts, with our actions. The neighbor is every person who crosses our path in need. The gospel shows us that the true religion is charity. So may we be Samaritans in all situations, at home through patience, at work through respect, in the streets through compassion, in society through actions that foster peace. And just like Jesus ends the parable with a command, we can reflect that and apply to ourselves. Go and do likewise. That is the call. That is the mission. May we hear it and live it. And just like that, we reached the end of our episode today of this special segment of Parable Fridays, where we looked at the parable of the Good Samaritan. As usual, if this message touched your heart, share it with someone in need of light. And may the peace of Jesus always be with you. With fraternal love, your Spiritist companion.